Beginning in the 1970s as a mail-order catalog, the Surfcaster has long been known as the source for hard-to-find surf fishing gear, and I've been personally shopping with them since the 1980s. They offer honest advice and the best recommendations regardless of your experience level, and will tailor their suggestions to what you actually need.
As you would expect from a business that's been serving the surfcasting community for 50 years, their prices are competitive and delivery is always quick and secure. They want you to have the best possible experience in the surf and have the knowledge and inventory to put the right gear in your hands to make that happen. So check out the Surfcaster at www.thesurfcaster.com, and if you're in the area, stop into their brand new brick and mortar store in Shelton, Connecticut. So, Dave, is it fair to say that level sync needles are in right now? Is that fair?
I would, yeah, definitely.
Why? Why is that, do you think?
I think there's like parallel reasons why. I think maybe I think the simpler explanation is just that it's such a fad for builders to make them right now. And I think it's a little bit of a badge of honor kind of to be able to nail that, because it isn't easy to make one, and it isn't easy to make them consistent, because if you're making a level sink needlefish, most guys that make them don't want them to sink too fast, so you've got to have a certain density of wood, and you've got to marry yourself to that, or else you're going to make an inconsistent product. So I think that has a lot to do with it. Just so many builders right now being like, I'm making a level sink, and it. Also, I just think it sounds kind of sexy, but the other thing is that they actually have a real use, and I think in certain situations they stand out far ahead of what I would call a conventional needlefish, which is more like a Habs, tail heavy. And made to cast a long way. So yeah, I mean, level sync has a shortcoming in that they don't cast quite as well. But I think that they have a real use to them. Something that there's a reason why you should always have them in the bag. And I mean, I think when I think back to when I first made what became the flat glide, I was trying to make a needlefish that would sit level. At the time, I don't think there were too many out there that sat like that. I'm not saying that I invented the level sink needlefish, but it was something that was in my head as something that I wanted, because I wanted to. I mean, I think I've made it pretty clear in my writing that I'm somebody who likes to stop my plug. And if you do that with a Habs, I'll just use my daughter's pencil here. If you do that with a Habs, it goes like this, and I can't stop it. So I wanted something that would hang in place. So I'm using basically the same philosophy that I apply to fishing with a spook style plug, where if you make a tail heavy spook, you get the same thing. It's going then it back and forth, and then you stop it and it goes tail down. And my experience is that when that happens, the fish just goes, nah, but if you can leave it sitting in a natural position, then you've got something going on. And so that's what I wanted originally when I made that plug. I wasn't trying to make a gliding needlefish. That was like a welcome side effect of the process.
The result of it.
Yeah. It turned into like a wooden sluggo. But what I really wanted was to be able to fish it in really a specific spot where I had a pretty good hard sweeping tide, shallow water, a lot of eelgrass under the water. So I had to stay in a certain zone not to get hung up in the crap. And I also wanted to be able to cast it out, up tide. And then, if I was fishing like a Habs, I would have to keep reeling and reeling to stay connected to it. I wanted to have something that would sit in a position that I knew was a natural position, and then be able to guide it through that area rather than trying to keep up with it the whole time. And that's why I think the level sink is so useful. It's because it stays in that natural position, and because when they're made to sink on the slower side, you can hold them on a not even on a tight line, just on like a you know almost tight line, and
Yeah,
they're
light
going to
tension.
do light tension. Thank you. And they're going to go through the zone in a natural position. They're going to go through the area or cover that piece of water in a way that I believe a bait fish is going to do naturally.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Amazing. So since you brought it up, I'm curious because I have actually been doing pretty good on tail sink. Do you think that there are scenarios where the tail sink is better, or what? Just what are your thoughts on tail sink? I'd just be curious.
I use them all the time, and I think they have a really important place in my bag as well. I fish a tail sink needlefish. I call that a conventional needlefish. That's just the buzzword that rolls through my mind.
Mhm.
Um, I throw that when it's rougher. I throw that um, when I have a little bit deeper water sometimes. And I think the main time that I throw that is when I want to reach out. I want to be able to reach water that I can't reach with anything else. Um, and I'm so confident with needlefish anyway, that if I can't reach that water with anything else and I reach it with a needlefish and I don't hook up, I'm probably wrong about this, but I at least feel like I put my best pitch out there and it didn't happen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, but I throw them interchangeably. I guess one other thing I would say about conventional needle versus a level sink is a level sink is really hard to get all the way to the surface. You can get it within a couple inches of the surface, but until it gets pretty close to you and you've got a short line, it's typically staying, at least a few inches underwater, where a tail weighted needlefish planes to the surface and you're getting that V wake. And, I call the other word that I use when I'm talking about tail sink needlefish is traction. So if it's heavy enough that I have traction in that surf, then I can feel it. If I'm throwing a level sink or a flat glide or something and it's really rough and I'm not connected to it, I don't feel confident because I don't. Now I'm just saying to myself, I mean, I hope it's doing what I want it to do out there. Whereas with a tail sink needlefish in rougher water, I feel like I'm always connected, and you have the option to fish it faster if you want to, which sometimes the conditions dictate that you just need to fish it faster than you maybe think you should.
Yeah. Interesting. Um,
Yeah.
is there a bait? I think, anyways, you're a little bit in the camp that Toby and I are, or completely. I'm not sure exactly, but so this question may not be applicable, but is there a bait or a bait behavior that you think the tail weight might replicate better than like a flat glide or level sink?
I think of my plugs more as tools, so to be used in a certain situation. If you pressed me and said, what is a really good situation or bait situation to throw a tail sink needlefish in, I would probably say if there was mullet around, because the tail sink needlefish allows you to fish it faster, and you can replicate that action. I mean, I would typically in fishing in a mullet situation, I probably wouldn't start with that, but I have had times where that was the key, including daytime, which is a rare moment for me to throw a needlefish in the daytime. But when you see those mullet doing that like straight streak, like getting the hell out of there
Hmm.
because they're about to get destroyed, it's really easy to replicate that with a tail sink needle or like a super strike bullet or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that gets me all excited. Like my heart started beating a little bit faster when you talk about the mullet, V waking,
Speaking
and
mullet.
get out of there. That gets me all
Yeah,
hot and bothered. Whew, that
yeah,
gets me out of the collar.
me too.
Yeah. um, these are rapid fire. Uh, traditional needle versus a fat needle versus a wad versus a long versus a short. Thoughts? Like, you know, is there?
That's a
There's a lot in there. Let me back up. That's too
that's a
much.
whole that's a
That's
whole
too much.
podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's actually it's a whole seminar series. let me back up. A wad. Thoughts?
Well, I've always loved the wad. And I would say I kind of taking little pieces from the question that you rescinded there. I think what you're asking me is more like, what is what's like my preferred, like if you looked in my bag, what are you going to find
Exactly.
needlefish wise?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
So I I definitely trend toward wider, fatter needlefish that are typically more buoyant, not always. Um, so if you look in my bag, you're not usually going to find many super strike needles. It's not because I don't like them. It's just because I only use them at certain situations or certain times. And usually when I'm using a super strike, I load it. Um, but I even like my stubby needles, I typically will fish like an after hours because it has a little bit more bulk to it. And I just feel like maybe it's the areas that I fish, or maybe it's just something in my head, but I just like to have that little bit bigger profile because I feel like it replicates a wider menu of possibilities.
Yeah. Cool.
Would you consider your flat glide in the wad family?
Good question.
Maybe a
Yeah,
half brother of it.
definitely. It's funny that you say that because one day I was at Surf Day down in Jersey, and this was probably like 2012 or something like that. And Donnie Musso came up to me and he was asking me some questions about an article I'd written that included some Danny Pickney stuff. And, I was questioning its historical accuracy. We don't need to get into that. But he picked up a flat glide and was like, "Us is kind of like a wad." And I was like, "Well, I mean, yes, it is in its own way, but it uh, has its own special traits or whatever. Um, but in a lot of ways, I mean, it is a lot like a wad in the fact that it's the same length and it's a little bit lighter. Uh, so yeah, I'd consider it to be a close cousin for sure.
Can I say this? I think it's better though. I think I mean, if you're asking Jerry Audet's opinion, there's no comparison. Give me the flat glide all day long, every day, forever, over. I don't have any.
Well,
I thought I lost my last Beachmaster wad. I thought just the other day. It turned out it was stuck on a surf top that I took out of my vehicle and hung up, and so I was hanging up, and it was hanging from the sleeve. So, anyways, I found it, but I literally had a moment of like, oh well, that kind of sucks. Whatever. I got flat glides. Doesn't matter. I don't care.
Yeah.
So. That's
I appreciate that, and I mean I like them better too, but it's become it's the first thing I throw pretty much every time I fish, so it's like an extension of my hand at this point.
Yeah, sure, totally.
It's funny though, like I'm actually considering, or I'm not considering, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go through the process of streamlining the flat glide this year, to make it so it fishes properly with one hook, because I don't feel like with the one hook solution it doesn't fish quite the same, and I know I can nail it if I design it from the ground up. That doesn't mean I'm not gonna throw away the original recipe, but I'm definitely gonna make these because I fish it with one hook all the time now, and I'm still doing just fine with it. And I lose a lot fewer fish with just the one hook.
Yes.
But I know I can Cadillac that thing. And also, with another, what are we looking at? It's almost been 20 years that I've been building that thing, and I have a lot of new experience to apply to this. So I think I can make it as better than it even is now.
Wow, that's really exciting. Also got my heart going a little bit. That's really exciting. Right, Toby?
So the current version of it is essentially still the same as it was when you first debuted it. You haven't done really any tweaks along the way.
It was only one change, and I don't think really anybody has any of the first ones because I only made, I don't know, 20 of them or something like that. So originally it had a tail weight that I pushed way up inside the body to get to that balance point, and then I doweled it. But once I realized that it was going to be something that I wanted to make a lot of, I was like, this is going to take too long,
Yeah.
So, we went through the process of finding that balance point with belly weights, and Now I'm just going to take that rear hook off and, work on it one more time. And I'm actually excited to do it because I love doing that kind of stuff. So
That's cool. Speaking of the flag light, where does your now I'm just asking questions because I want to know. The listeners can just listen in on Jerry's thoughts here and questions. But where do you think your mini excels? Because you gave me some of your minis recently, and I've actually done pretty friggin' well on them. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but it's something that it's a story I always tell when people ask me about that plug. I made that plug for the Jersey guys. They asked for it. Can you make a small one?
Oh.
Okay, sure, I can make a small one. And now, being the naive moron that I was at that time, I was just like, I got it working. I was like, well, I like the action. It looks good in the water, blah, 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 whatever. I sold it to them, and I kept a few, but I really never fished them. Then Tom Kaczynski came up to fish with me, and we went to a spot that you've been to with me, a really good spot, gravel bar that is very productive year round, doesn't matter what the tide. And he, smoking me in my own spot. And I'm like, dude, what are you using? And he's like, oh, the mini flat glide. So you're smoking me in my own spot on my own plug that I don't even have in my bag. And so that never happened again. From that day forward, I always had that plug on me. And, if you look in my bag now, I keep them in my bucktail loops. So I have 5 of them in 5 bucktail loops all the time. They never leave the bag unless I got to change the hooks. Where do I think it excels? I think it excels, mostly in shallower water, but I think it excels pretty much anywhere as long as it's not too rough. And I throw it when I'm getting interest on a bigger plug, but they're not committing to it. I always want to downsize when I am sort of inferring some interest on the part of the fish, but they're either not totally convinced or maybe they're just keyed in on a smaller size. For whatever reason, downsizing always seems to turn on that bite for me.
That's really interesting because that recently it's basically been kind of my experience where for the most part they've been on big needles, and then when they're kind of not, it seemed like that's when the little one would come in. It had nothing really to do with the action of it or anything. It seemed like that change in an overall profile, because the presentation's the same, where it is in the water column and how fast it's fishing it, all that kind of stuff was the same.
Yep.
So that's been my observation too. That's really interesting. What do you think when fish are smashing needles on the surface? What does that tell you? Does that tell you anything? What do you think?
Well, do you mean like the plug hits the water and they annihilate it right away? Or do you mean like typical retrieve and the hits are really violent?
They're really violent, and we actually could see the hits sometimes on the surface.
Like the big white burst out there in the dark water.
Yes.
That to me usually tells me, well, I mean, if I want to give you a short answer, it tells me I'm using the right plug. But usually, I mean, I read that as a competitive scenario, which to me is like the dream scenario. That's what you always want. If I'm getting really hard hits and and seeing those white explosions out there, I always assume that there are more fish than there are bait, and these fish are they're racing each other to get there first.
Awesome. I don't want to make any public comments. We'll talk about it offline. Toby, I got one more question. I don't know if you have anything, but I got one more question. If you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever fished needles where you thought there were mackerel, and like how did you approach that? What do you think? Just general. That's very vague, but I'll just give me Dave thoughts.
Well, I have done that, but it was a very unconventional situation. It was, 10 years ago. It was the canal. It was daytime. We were having this like consistent afternoon bite on mackerel. And one of the days I went, the fish were really shy about hitting the magic swimmer. They were not really smashing pencils like I expected. So I was like, it's just what I always do. I try to think my way through it. Like what can I change, And so that night I dug out a mackerel colored Beachmaster wad, one of the old fat ones, and brought it with me the next day. And yeah, I mean, it worked. What I was doing is throwing it out there and reeling it in as fast as I could. Um, and most of the time I would get a fish following it, just like almost like to the point that it would beach itself, but it would never eat it. I did get a couple fish. If you're asking me if I knew there were mackerel in this actual surf, would I throw a needle? I would try it, but I think I would probably use something like a NLBN paddle tail or something like that. That
Okay.
would be my go-to.
Okay. All right, so for those who don't know, you probably don't surf fish at all. You've probably read nothing. You've probably never seen a YouTube video, and you've never listened to the podcast. But this is Dave Anderson. He is the New England editor of The Fisherman. He is one of the longest running columnists at Surfcasters Journal, the previous editor and sort of tastemaker of Surfcasters Journal for many years before I took over. And he is a plug maker extraordinaire, among many other things, including a fish fanatic and wiffle ball and great guy and good dad and all kinds of other things. Dave is going to be building plugs this winter. He's going to be at Surf Day in Jersey, and he's going to be at the Saltwater Edge Striper Day. I think they call it Striper Kickoff show,
Yep.
which is usually in April, right, Dave? That's usually April, I think.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And so these the flat glides that we've been talking about, you will be able to snag them there if you're lucky enough to get in on time. And I'm sure you'll have deep swimmers and who knows what else you'll have, Dave, because you always have some fun things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So today we are talking about, well, apparently we're talking about needlefish for a long time, which is great. But we're actually going to talk a little bit about Dave's observations that he's been making recently in his kayak and how that has sort of flavored or changed or helped things that he does in the surf. But before we get to that, Dave, we have been asking all of our interviewees recently just how their season's been going and anything that's sort of notable, good, bad, ugly, whatever. Just something that comes to your mind when you think about your season to this point.
Okay. I mean, I would call this season good. I wouldn't call it exceptional. I think my spring was eye-opening because I did things differently than I usually do. I've been trying to, I don't know, I guess challenge myself to fish more during the day. I want to learn like how important it really is to be out at night. And, eventually there will be, stories written about that. But it was, I guess the short part of that story is I did well, in the daytime. And I learned some stuff about appealing to the way that it seems to me that striped bass feed during the day, which is different than the way that they feed at night. So that was very eye-opening. My summer fishing has been kind of sporadic. I had a really busy July. I was on vacation, then I was at ICAST, and then when I was getting off the plane from ICAST, at least this is when I think it happened, I hurt my back, and so I tried to power through it, and that was a huge mistake. It just kept getting worse, so I had to sit it out for a while. I'm fine now and back at it again. So my summer has felt very disjointed, but the spring was. I had a good time and learned a lot in the spring. And I guess one notable thing is something that I think probably most people would say is just not catching a lot of small bass right now.
When you're saying you describe the season as good, would that be in reference to, let's say, recent years or over a long term? Is it like over a long term career? It still would qualify as good, or just sort of good for the new norm?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say my numbers overall are probably not what they were in like, I don't know, 2013. I think 2013 was like my best year ever.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like, I don't know, I think I might be different than most people because I am much more interested in learning something new than I am in just like pounding that number again. So I will regularly give up an opportunity that I know is probably going to be a good opportunity if I can try something a little bit different to learn something else. So I've been learning a lot, and that's why it feels so successful. So I don't know how to put that into an answer to your question, but I think you know what I mean. I don't know.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's actually a good way to live. Not just fish,
Mm-hmm.
but a good way to live. Because
Sure.
sometimes it's hard to recapture, especially as you start to get a little older. Sometimes it's going to be hard to
Yeah.
recapture things that have happened. And maybe that's a
Wait,
lesson.
did you just
even
low
for-
key call Dave old there? Or did
I don't know. I was trying not to. Yeah, I know. I'm getting kind of. Yeah, I know.
We're all there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Great question, Toby. Has there been any new? I know you like to play with lures. You like to experiment. Blah blah blah. Has there been a standout lure for you this season so far? Curious.
There has. I feel like we're gonna be, I just was talking to my buddy Anthony, and he was saying that he heard your podcast with Manzi, who I actually have to call. But he, he said he talked a lot about the banana plug, and that's been my big eye-opening plug this year. Um, it's it's just been, especially because it lends itself so well to this daytime, sort of study, I guess, that I'm conducting, because it really plays right into the hands of the way that I feel like stripers are feeding during the day. So, I mean, I give you a quick breakdown of that. In the daytime, what I've noticed is that it really seems like, of course, I can't prove this, but it really seems like the fish are feeding visually. So you're appealing to their tendency to not let something get away. Whereas at night, I feel like they're hunting more with their lateral line, and I feel like they are almost, I don't know how to say it. It's like they're disguising themselves within the environment and then striking when they have the opportunity, or they're setting themselves up in a place where that opportunity is likely to happen over and over again. In the daytime, I feel like because a lot of times I'm fishing in a spot where there's a lot of fish, that you get that competitive scenario where they all see it at once, and then it's just like this mad dash to get on it. Um, and I mean, I can give you a pretty good example. I was fishing in a river in May. It was May, and it's a place I know really well, but I purposely didn't go when I knew the tide was good. It had a perfect tide that day of, the high water had been at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And so we had falling tide, through first light. That would have been guaranteed. But I stayed home and I went there at 9:30 in the morning, which was a kind of a off tide, sunny, just a not a good, typically not a good day to go fishing. But I'm trying to learn. So I, put myself in a crappy situation and see what happens. So I go down there. There's a guy there already, and there's a bar that sticks out across the mouth of this river. It's deep on one side, it's shallow on the other. And I've, over 20 something years fishing there, that edge of that bar has always been good. Luckily, he was fishing in the deep water. So I stopped and I talked to him for a minute. And he's like, yeah, it was good at first light and it's been pretty slow ever since. He's like, it's just enough action where I can't leave. Like every time I think I'm going to leave, I get a blow up or a swirl or whatever. So I'm like, all right, that sounds good. Uh, so I set myself up on that edge, and I throw the banana on. So the first cast, I throw it out. I'm just ripping that thing across that edge, and I see a fish come up behind it. So I look at the guy; he didn't see it. So I throw it out there again, and I hook up immediately. And he's like, "Oh, hey, looks like there's some fish here. There's a couple coming through or something." Over the next 2 hours, I had 13. He had 0. And now that wasn't like fun for me. Like I actually felt bad. And I was trying to say, like, because he was like, oh, that plug, you made that plug and it's like a secret. And I'm like, well, first of all, I didn't invent it. Somebody else invented it. Second of all, it is the plug, but it's actually, I think it's more the action. Like just put something on that you can fish like I'm fishing it. And he wouldn't do it. And if the fact that those fish were not coming up for anything, anything that most people would consider typical. And then when I was fishing that thing so fast that I was literally getting blisters on my hands. I think I sent the picture to Jerry, just from cranking so hard to keep that thing swimming. And it's got to be frantic. You're fishing it so hard that a single retrieve is only like 20 seconds. But that action was the only thing. Those fish were laying there on that edge, waiting for something to come over. This guy was trying to do it with a popper, but it's 5, 6 feet of water on top of that edge. They're not going up for that. But that thing's coming through. It's a big meal. It looks just like a bunker. It's acting like it's seen them. That's what I wanted to say. That's the thing I almost forgot to say. Is that plug acts like it's seen them, and it's like, oh shit, and it's got to get out of there. And so that's the trigger. And that's like one of the biggest things that I've learned this year. Fishing typical surf spots that I would usually only fish at night, and still finding fish, is that those fish very often are there. You just have to show them a different look to get them to react.
Now, when you were saying you were kind of like, you throw something that sort of does this to the guy.
Right.
He obviously didn't have a banana in his bag because he's thinking you created this, etc. What might he have had that's, let's just say, if nothing else, more readily available than the bananas that might get in that range of what that's
I have a follow-up question to that question, too, after.
Well, it's interesting because the next day, of course, I went back. I'm like, I got to try to replicate this. So I went back the same tide. There was another guy there, a different guy. And he said the exact same thing. It's like, oh, man, we haven't had a hit in a couple hours. And I was like, that's all right. I already walked all the way down here. I'm going to throw a few casts. So first cast, I hook up on like a 20-pounder. And he's like, holy shit, wow. And I was like, oh, hey, I guess I got lucky. Two casts later, I had like a 15-pounder. And he's like, what? He's like, do you mind if I come over there? I'm like, no, come on over. He's like, what is that? So I show it to him. And I was like, I made this, but it's not any big secret. Like, you could go online and look it up. It's called the banana plug. There's plans out there. And he's like, oh, I am a woodworker. Maybe I'll try making one. I'm like, yeah, you should. So, I got another fish that was probably like, I don't know, 24 pounds or something like that. And this guy, without being prompted by me, was like, I got to change this. I got to change this up. I got to do something different. So he put on I think it was a hydro minnow, a Yozuri hydro minnow, which is basically a red fin or a SP minnow or something like that, a plastic lip swimmer. And he was just ripping it in, just jerk, stop, jerk, stop. And he was, he did get a fish, and he told me, he's like, I'm getting hits. Like, they're just not committing to it like they are that plug. And to me, watching that guy go through that process, I was like, this guy's a thinker, and that kind of made me like, I don't know what the right word, I don't want to say I was like proud of him. I wasn't proud of him, but I loved that. I love seeing somebody be like, no, I'm not giving up. I'm going to figure this out. And, I think that sort of competitive tendency is something that probably lives in all of us. The three of us talking, and really anybody listening to this who has that never say die attitude. I mean, that's how you learn new stuff. That's how you go from being, someone who just likes fishing to somebody who gets it, and I just thought that was really a really cool thing to observe.
Yeah. So very specifically, because I couldn't ask Manzi this because he had no idea what I was talking about, but my love of the freestyler. You fished it.
Yeah.
How does it compare? Because when I see what the banana kind of does, or what it can do, and I know what I can do with the freestyler, to me there's so much similarity, but I don't have a banana. I actually do have a banana, but it's not a good one.
Yep.
How does it compare? What are they close? I'm talking about the Savage Gear freestyler for people who don't know what I'm talking about. All right, go ahead.
To be honest with you, Jerry, I couldn't speak on that and feel confident about my ability to give you a 2-column breakdown of those
okay.
two plugs. I don't know the freestyler well enough. I have them. I have tried them. I have not put in enough time with them.
Okay.
I think the thing that makes the banana great and this might answer your question without me having to, break it down. The
Sure.
thing that makes the banana great is its vibration. Um,
Okay.
when you like to put it another way, like I fished the banana off of a boat, um, and I did okay on it. It's really hard to work that plug from a boat because you can't you need the long rod. That's what I figured out. Like if I go on a boat again to fish that plug, I'm going to bring like a 9 foot rod because you're staying tight to it. You're pointing the rod at it, then you're lifting up. You're going, whoop, and that makes the plug go, and then you're down to catch up to it. And you go, and that thing is just every time it's going, and then it goes off to one side, then off to the other side, and that's how you work it, or at least that's how I work it. And it's that like freaking out, like getting the hell out of there, like jet propelled vibrating motion is what gets them going on that plug.
So that actually sounds more like the Weston 15 centimeter, actually.
Okay.
The Weston Swim 15 centimeter, which is like 5 ounces. That's how I fish that plug, where normally when you're just swimming it, quote unquote, normally it rocks back and forth and it swims like a typical glider, like largemouth bass. It's designed for pike, whatever. But when you give that thing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it goes through the water, wah, wah, wah,
Yeah.
and then it's wah, 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 through the water. When you stop that and it stops, that's when they smash it. And
Yep.
or it's right when you go to start it again. One of those things.
Yep.
So interesting. Yeah, I was curious. I've been dying to ask about the freestyler because they even kind of look the same. So
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? So
And another plug that is very well may have even been inspired by the banana is the stick shad. The floating stick shad has a lot of the same characteristics, fishes very similarly. Um, and that was something else that when that other guy, the first day, I was like, "Do you have a stick shad?" Like, but he was staying on that one rail.
yeah,
He was living or dying on it.
Without going all in on another banana episode, which I'm sure people would.
I know, but I'm loving it, right?
Yeah. So you're talking a lot, and you wrote about it a bit, and we've touched base a little bit with the banana. It seems a lot of daytime. Is it seeing a large percentage of nighttime use by you? Is it producing well, or is it really more you're leaning on it in the daylight?
I catch fish on it at night, but for me it has not been nearly as productive as it is in the daytime. I may need to, work on a different presentation, which I have, messed around with it a little bit, but it seems more like the nighttime hits are just like, oh, I got one. Like it's just kind of random, and then I put on something more, you know, typical, throw a darter or something like that, and it's like, you're getting fish pretty regularly. So it does seem to be a daytime plug for me.
Cool. Speaking of daylight, I guess we are going to get to kayaking. I didn't think we were going to here for a second because I've been having so much fun asking these questions.
Yeah.
But you told me via text or email, I can't remember which, that you have been really enjoying kayak fishing this year, and that you've really been enjoying specifically observing, and that you've been really having a good time. And we're going to pivot to this for the remainder of the episode. You said to me to start off that you like to just sit and observe and not really run around chasing the fish with either your eyes or your electronics. And that some of the kayak guys are giving you a hard time, like, why, what are you doing? You're just going to sit there for an hour or whatever. Like, let's go. The fish are over here or whatever. And you're like, no. Why are you doing that? Can you kind of explain that, like what you were saying to me?
Well, again, I take so much more out of any outing if I can learn something. So, like the particular outing that we were discussing that day, I had gotten out there before pretty much all the other kayak guys. It was fully dark, and that's it's a little sketchy, especially out front. This was out front. There's reefs and, big rocks and all kinds of crap out there that I sort of know where it is, but so I had done well already. I found some fish in the dark. They were very receptive. And so, at that point, it's like, okay, I'm satisfied. right? So there we had a little bit of topwater action at first light, and then then it was kind of looking on the screen and like, oh, here's a school of fish, and most of them weren't feeding. And then I was just like watching these guys trolling the tube and worm, and I'm like, that is the last thing that I want to do. Just paddling around with a rod in my hand, like hoping, that just doesn't feel like fishing to me. That's not, by the way, that's not a knock on them. I'm happy for them. Every time they get a good fish, it's like, hell yeah, you know what I mean? But for a while, I was trying different things to see if I could get those fish to eat. I couldn't. So I decided I was going to go home and get some work done. So I was pedaling back to the launch, and I started seeing all these clouds of small fish like around any big rock that I would go over. And I was like, oh, I wonder what those are. So I'm just kind of watching them, and I'm paying attention to the current and seeing that, you know, first of all, which is pretty predictable, but they really are stationed on that down current side of the rock, every single one of them. But a lot of certain rocks are not holding any bait at all. And so now I'm like intrigued. Why is this rock not good? Why has that rock got a ton? So um I had my little, like, basically my Albie rod in the yak with me. So I put a 3-inch NLBN paddle tail on with like I guess it was probably like a 3/8 ounce head. And I'm in like 20 feet of water. So I'm kind of feeding it down, just letting it get all the way down. And, when I saw some of those clouds of bait, and they were all sea bass, they were all like, say 6 to 12 inch sea bass. And so now I'm like, all right, I just take the opportunity to learn. So the water was so clear that day that I could literally see the bottom in 20 feet of water. So I'm looking down and seeing, okay, there's a rock below me. There are some fish on this one. Why are they on this? Most of the ones that held like a good cloud of bait were on the edge of a transition from, like, that weedy sort of like shrub looking bottom to sand. So anytime we would transition to a sand patch, there'd be a ton of those sea bass on that. And in those sand patches, if I let the bait get all the way to the bottom and just kind of bounce it along, I was picking up like 12 to 13, 14-inch fluke in that area too. So that gives me something to work with, both from the surf and from the kayak later, because now I'm starting to, I've always been a big believer in transition zones for various things. But, now we have, at least in my mind, I'm seeing this with my own eyes and confirming it, by catching these fish and also by seeing them on the screen. And that was, I mean, those guys, one of the guys I talked to after, he's like, oh, I got like 18 fish after you left. And I'm like, whatever. Like, they were all caught in the tube and worm. I don't really care. But I learned this, and you probably never even looked at that, and to me, that is going to come up later at some point in my life, where that is going to make a huge difference in, why I'm hooked up when everybody else isn't. And that's, I don't, like I said before, I don't go out there trying to be the guy that catches fish when nobody else does. But I do like to catch fish. And, if I can do anything to give myself an edge, I feel like I'm going home with something bigger than, what I actually caught.
So you may have already answered this a little bit, but I'm curious, are you kayaking your surf spots, or are you kayaking kayak spots and then translating what you're like? Because you were talking about your kayaking and you're translating something you saw to your surf spots, but are you actually kayaking through your surf spots?
I don't do too much of that, just because so many of my surf spots would be treacherous to go in a kayak. As I get better at it, though, and that's the other thing, I'm trying to learn the current in the kayak right now. And I actually almost got myself in trouble. One of the last times I was out, I had a fish on. It was dragging me into the reef. The current was pushing me into the reef, and I was like, so I had to literally put the rod under my elbow and pedal as hard as I could backwards to try to back out against the tide. And obviously I did it because I'm here.
Fortunately.
but that was a scary moment, and that's part of, like, as bad as that was, that I let myself get into that situation. I'm glad I let myself get into that situation, because it taught me something that most people wouldn't ever know. And that is, that is like exactly how close I really can get in that kind of current and still be able to get myself out of it. And not saying that I am going to put myself close to that situation again. I'm going to try like hell not to.
Yeah, right,
But
right. Because
but it's
if you keep trying to see how close you can get, one of the times you're going to make the wrong decision, and you're really
Right.
going to find
And then
out.
You'll step too far.
right, exactly. But so as I get more and more, I guess, fluent in the way the water moves through these places and what that means when in a kayak, then I definitely will. There's one spot that it's probably going to be the next place I go, which is one of my surf spots, but I know it's safe. Um, and I'm really looking forward to that. Like, really, really looking forward to it.
So you already gave us a really good tip. I mean, I just learned something already that you just said, or confirmed a bias I already had about the transition. But has there been like a big surprise that you found on the kayak that's really translated to the surf, or has it all been sort of incremental, or confirmed things you already knew?
Or even like expanding just a touch on it, positive or negative, like a conception, preconceived notion or something that was altered.
Boy, I mean, I could go on and on with that, honestly.
Okay.
I'll give you two. One, I think we talked about a little bit last time, but I now have gone and discovered a new place that I could and will fish from the surf. I've only kayak fished it so far. It produced a lot of really nice fish this year. Um, and it's one of those like rare magic spots where nobody fishes. I can't figure out why. There's nobody ever there, and I, will protect it to my grave. But um, that spot, it produces fish on a particular tide. And I think we talked about this before. I always wondered, like, do these fish, are they there and then they turn on, or do they move in? They definitely move in. This place is just the same. Like, I got there early, like after we did really well. I was like, I'm gonna go and get there 2 hours early, and I was like, oh, they're not here tonight. Maybe it's not gonna happen. Blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden, like right as that tide was just about to make up, they came in like they were coming in at an angle. They all came in together. I mean, I see it on the screen as clear as day. They just coming in all in like a big parade, and then they just set up in these two spots where they really like. And so that's something that I find to be fascinating, and I wish that I could explain it. And I wish I knew where they come from. They're coming from somewhere. And then the other thing that has been really eye-opening to me is really two things. No, I'm going to keep one of those for myself. But anyway, one thing that's been really eye-opening to me is the difference between a jig head and a weighted swim bait hook. Um, there have been multiple times where the weighted swim bait hook has far outfished a jig head, and I've been trying really hard to figure out why, and I really just think it's because that jig head, I mean the swim bait hook allows that bait to go like this when it sinks, instead of with a jig head where it's going like this. And so
nose down, sort of nose down at an angle versus go straight down with the jig head.
That's right. I forgot this is a podcast.
Yeah,
like the needle, like how you were talking earlier with the tail weighted needlefish versus.
Yes. So this is. I mean, and head first is better, of course, but the way that it's translated to the surf for me is just learning that spot that I'm talking about. Like later on in the tide, they fall off into this deeper water, and they become much harder to target. And doing it with a jig head has, I mean, it works. sometimes. But when I've gone to, what I've been using is like a 14-inch rubber eel. I've been using the ones made by Big Water by Matt Perry. But any one of them would work, whether it's a GT or or an XO or whatever, it would work for any of them. But that I really feel like that position, keeping that bait in a natural position, and also the way that swim bait hook makes that thing sink, so it's kind of meandering as it goes down through the water column. And then all I'm doing is what I do in the surf when I fish from the kayak. I'm just guiding it along. And this is all by feel. I'm not marking these fish anymore because I'm casting far away from the kayak, and I'm just letting it get down, and then I'm just feeling my way through it, just guiding it through when I get it down to the depth that I want it at. And it just works. It just works so much better than a jig head. And I'm going to continue to experiment with some of the heavier swim bait hooks. I think that once you get to a certain point, I have a feeling it's not going to be the same anymore. I'm using much lighter line. I'm using 30-pound test line, just to reduce the drag. And it all comes together to make a difference. I'm using a half-ounce head in 30 feet of water, and I'm able to get it down, and I'm able to guide it along. And I'm also, sort of changing my view on how strong braid is, because, you're always worried, if I go below 50, what's going to happen if I hook a 50? You're going to land it is what's going to happen, as long as it doesn't swim around a rock or something like that, because that line is way stronger than we give it credit for.
Yeah, I believe that actually, pretty staunchly. You've already answered one of my questions, so I'm going to skip over, which is about the plug, because I think that hearing you talk about all of that really answers my question about, is there a plug or something that you've been using a kayak that you believe now in even more strongly in the surf? It sounds like this is a great example of that. Yeah.
Sure.
If I wanted to get a kayak simply to increase my surf productivity, has there been anything where you're like, no, now that I've done it, I really think you should do this?
I would just say, don't go out with the intention of just catching fish. I would say go out with the intention of trying to figure something out. Because if you just go out there, especially with all of the things that are afforded to us nowadays with side scan and everything else, if you just go out there and you're like, all right, this is easy now. I can see there's fish here. I'll just keep casting until one of them eats it. That's just not fun, and you're not learning anything. So that's what I would say. It's just, go out there with the most open mind that you can possibly muster, and experiment as much as possible, because one of the things that's been really great about the kayak is that so many things that work so well, standing on a rock in the surf, just don't work from a kayak. Like fishing a darter from a kayak ain't gonna happen, unless you throw an anchor or something. But doing the same thing with like what's a good example? Like a Nessie, for example. Doing the same type of a thing with that. Now you're getting somewhere. Now you're learning something new about this silly little freshwater bait, and you're thinking about it in the way you think about a darter, and then all of a sudden it's the light bulb goes off, and you've got a new weapon, you've got a new presentation, and you've got something that can cross over from one to the other and then back again.
Nice. Yeah.
So do you regret not getting a kayak sooner to play into your surf side of things, or are you kind of happy you got it at this stage?
I think it was the right time, because in a lot of ways, my surf fishing for a couple years was stagnating a little bit. It kind of coincided with losing my dad. I had a time where my motivation was really low. And it was just processing that, and just kind of having to go through the grieving process, I guess. Then I got, then you sold me the kayak, and I was like, okay, this is new, and it sort of tricked me into finding my motivation again. And that, I mean, so that's why it was the perfect time. Because I also, this may sound like ridiculous, but when I was younger, I wouldn't have been brave enough to do it.
Mm.
I would have been, like too scared that something would happen. I don't know why. As I'm older, and I have so much more to lose, I don't feel that way. But yeah, I think the timing was just perfect.
Interesting.
Mm.
Uh, uh, Thanks for sharing that. Curious, because I'm not sure I've ever really heard any of this before, but I don't listen to kayak. I don't know if there's a kayak podcast. I'm sure there is somewhere, but um, many surf anglers, like Skinner, for example, will tell a beginner or someone who's an intermediate to fish with eels to figure out their spots. Have you tried the kayak by eel combo to see if it can help you learn anything or be more productive or whatever? Or what's your thoughts on that even?
I think that a live eel would work great from a kayak, but I have been avoiding that like the plague.
Okay.
Um, I'm to the point now, and I'm not saying that I won't ever fish eels. I will and do. Um, I prefer rigged eels over live eels at this point, just for the mobility and the lack of needing to keep them alive. But I I just like doing stuff with artificials now so much more. I mean, I think we've probably talked about, I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but, when I learned to carp fish, I was doing the berry thing with Rowan. And, he was like, yeah, you can just pick up berries and put it on a hook and do it with a spinning rod. And I was like, there is no effing way I am hooking a berry. That is not happening. So I made a berry. I just set my mind to it, and it took me a couple trips. I went with him 3 times, and I didn't catch a fish. He did, but I didn't care again because I was like, no, I'm figuring this out, and I finally did. And the little stupid little berries that I make crush them now, and that to me is that's what I like. So
Yeah. Well, I think the thing, it's been said many times before, a lot by fly fishermen, but by lure anglers too. When you're using a lure, you're sort of fooling the fish with your mind a lot more.
yeah,
The eel is fooling it. If you're using a live eel or even a chunk of bait, which I do, it's more you're fooling them with nature. But when you're using a lure, it's like you're fooling them with your mind, right? Because it's an extension of your mind, really.
right. And for me, like making that little berry, like that was first of all, the person I'm talking about is Rowan Lytle. He, you know who I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about, just so other people know. He
Yeah, go follow
is,
him on Instagram.
yeah, the brown trout angler no, is that it's Connecticut fly angler
Yeah.
on Instagram. He's one of the best fishermen I've ever fished with. He can produce any species. You could be like, I want to catch a really big dace, and he'd be like, all right, I got a spot for that. And then he would not only would he take you there, you would catch that dace that you want. He is unbelievable. Um, so when I did that thing with the berry, and he was like, wow, I've never seen anybody go through this process and succeed. That to me, like, even though he was, I was 17 when he was born or whatever, uh, to get his approval of that, an angler who I
Yes.
have this towering respect for,
Yes.
that was even more of a reward than having it work. Um, and he is somebody who really adheres to his craft. He's a fly fisherman. And the only time that I know of him really ever doing anything with a spinning rod, other than random casual moments here and there, is if he's going to target sharks from the beach. That's the
Sharks,
only
right.
time.
Mm.
Yeah. Anything else, he's doing it with the fly rod, and he makes it happen. And he's just, that was an incredible experience, and I feel really lucky that he's become such a great friend.
Yeah. We both have really big respect for that guy too. We'll have to get him on the podcast. Actually, that would make an interesting episode. Things we could learn, because you're right. He'll catch anything. You want a giant scup, a big porgy with your fly rod? Oh, we can do that. Let's go do that. You know, you want to. I mean, I've seen he does all kinds of weird, awesome things.
Yep.
So
Yep, and he's a snake expert. Like if you want to see a rattlesnake in Connecticut, he can take you and show you it.
Yeah.
He knows where they are.
It's really cool. Speaking of weird species, etc., I saw a photo that you sent me, and then I think I saw it publicly too. Toby, I think you said you did.
Yeah, I think I saw it on Big Water Baits on their Instagram.
Yeah, you got a shark in a big soft plastic. Can you take us through what happened there exactly?
On the kayak.
In the kayak. Could you take us through what happened there?
Yeah, so first of all, when I went out that morning, the day before, one of my buddies who's been fishing out there, he's like, "Oh, you're going in the morning?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going." He's like, "I almost guarantee you're going to get sharked." And I was like, "Oh, whatever." You know, all the time that I've been fishing the surf, it's never happened to me. So I was like, "Hey, whatever, I'll welcome one," you know. So, you know, in the dark, I got into some fish, and then it, you know, got a little bit lighter, and I got a fish on a topwater plug, and I'm bringing it in, and you know, I'm battling this thing, and I'm like, it doesn't feel that big, you know. And I looked down over the side, and I saw it swim by, and then I looked down over the side again, and I saw it swim by again. I was like, wow, that fish is bigger than I thought. And then I realized that's not the fish, that's a shark. So it was like a 15-pound bass. It bit it in half right at the gills. And I just pulled up the head, and I was like, wow, like the sheer the sheer power of that it's just mind-boggling. Sorry, I'm trying not to cough here. So whatever, the rest of the day goes by, and you know, I got a bunch more fish. Never had any more shark encounters. I'm getting ready to go back, and I got on like the place where we had found him early in the morning, and I didn't see anything, no sign of fish, but I was like, I got to make like 3 more casts before I leave. So I throw that you know, he calls it the silent partner, that long eel out there, and I'm just working it along real slow, and just kind of drifting with it, and just really not doing a whole lot as far as presentation goes. And then I get this really subtle touch, and I was like, oh. So I, you know, kind of reel up to get tight to it, and I was like, oh, I'm on, you know. So I bury the hook, and this thing just goes, just running. And like within 5 seconds, I was like, this is no way this is a bass. Like, if this is a bass, I'm about to break the world record. And so now I was using a conventional reel, so just kind of put my thumb on the spool, and it's pulling me at like trolling motor speed. And I was like, yeah, this is no bass. So, you know, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to land it. I don't even care. I'm just going to put everything I got into it. You know, if it flips me over, it flips me over, I guess, you know. So I'm battling, and it's taking line, and then I'm getting it close, and it's taking line. It's pulling me all over the place. And then my buddy Mario pedals over, and he's like, are you on? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, geez, you look like you're really fighting. I was like, it's not a bass, dude. It's definitely a shark. So he hung with me, and you know, sure enough, after 15 minutes or so, I got it right to the boat, and the thing was as docile as you can be when I got it to the boat. I even did what you're never supposed to do with a fish like that. I wrapped my hand around the leader because it was so heavy that I couldn't just hold the leader and pull it up. So, you know, I wrapped my hand around the leader. It was like it had been anesthetized. It was just like laying there. And so, you know, he took a couple pictures, and I decided that I would sacrifice that hook. So I just cut the line, and it just sunk out of sight. And then I saw it turn over and swim away. But it was definitely an epic battle.
That's cool.
I hooked another one the next time I went, but I had to break it off because it was pulling me into the rocks.
Ooh. Oh, that's cool. It's always cool to catch sharks on artificials because there's this very strong. I mean, it's true. They generally won't take one, but more and more of us are having the experience where they will. Some species are more, like blacktips will take artificials all day long, but like the brownies,
duskies when you're offshore.
Yeah, duskies. But
Can't
like,
keep them off your tuna gear.
Or like a mako, but like, you know, a lot of the sharks, there's this insinuation they'll never ever touch an artificial, and it just seems like more and more of us are proving that wrong as time goes on.
Right.
So that's cool. That's a cool story, Dave. All right, well, we got to about 12% of what I thought we would get to because there was so many things to talk about, which is always great. So this was a great conversation. So we were talking, the listeners listening to this, we were talking about it before we started recording. We'd like to get Dave on for some more frequent episodes, maybe shorter episodes. So hopefully we'll be doing more of that in the near future. Dave said he likes coming on, so that's good. He can stand he can stand listening to Toby and I ask these constant
questions.
Yeah, all these questions over and over. So thank you, Dave, so much for coming on. We appreciate it. Appreciate your thoughtful answers as always. And again, subscribe to the Fisherman and also check out the shows this winter for his plugs. If you don't have a flat glide and you even remotely care about needlefish, I don't know what you're doing. And I'm not just saying that because I like Dave or friends with him, he's on right now. I really mean it. I like, if you don't have one and you like needlefish, you're doing it wrong. Like, you need one. You need one.
I always say it's the gateway needle. It's,
exactly.
You know, it's the one that you don't need to just, you know, reel as slowly as you possibly can and just feel like you're falling asleep. Yes. You know, you actually have to do something. You got something to do, and it's a confidence builder.
That's right. That's right. So, Toby, I'll kick it over to you. I don't know if you want to say anything in closing.
Yeah, no, as always, appreciate you being on. And on Instagram, it's Striper Brain, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another good way to follow, check the plugs, and always obviously announce where you're going to be this winter, and you guys can line up right behind me to hit his table for sure.
Well, maybe we'll be there, Toby, so we won't have to stand in line.
Yeah. Excellent.
Gotcha, guys. Go.
This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.